Our next topic is something called immediately invoked function expressions. So let's take a look at what they are. So sometimes in JavaScript, we need a function that only needs to execute once and then never again. So basically a function that disappears right after it is called. It can only run once and never again. Now this might not make much sense right now. Also you may ask, why would we want to do that? Why would we want to create a function that only executes once? Isn't the function's sole purpose is to create a block of code that can be repeated again and again? You all are right. But hold on, I will be sharing the complete details revolving around IIFE and the possible use of IIFE. Do we use IIFE in modern JavaScript? And if not, then what is the alternate way of creating an IIFE or optimizing an IIFE and some workarounds IIFE, okay? So let's start from scratch. We can create a very simple function. I am going to call it run only once equals to a function, and then I'm going to print a very simple statement. This function will execute only once, okay, and then I can call it and we will get the expected result. Right now this is not stopping us from calling this function again and execute it. So I have called this function multiple times and I will be getting the desired result, so the expected result, okay? So this is not what we want to do. We want to actually execute a function immediately and not even having to save it somewhere. So how we would do that? How we would create a function like this? So we can write a function expression itself but without a name. So let me comment this out. So now we are going to write a function expression but without a name and without assigning it to any variable. So I can simply say this function and that's it. And now here I can take this entire console.log statement and then just paste it here, okay? So now this is a simple function expression on its own. Now it is generating an error. So if I hover over it, it says that identifier expected, because of course you cannot create a function like this, but our goal is to create a function expression, okay? So however, we can trick that. See, this is generating an error because we haven't given it a name. If we give it a name, this will become a function definition, right? And if I save this to a variable like this, say equals to something like this, this is function expression, right? But no, I want to create an immediately invoked function expression which has no name and it is also not stored in any variable, so a function independent on its own. But when we try to do this, we are running into an error which is identifier expected. How to solve this? However, we can trick the JavaScript engine to believe that this is an expression, and we do that by simply wrapping all of this into a parenthesis. So you open this parenthesis and take this entire function and then paste it inside, and now you see that the error is gone. If I save this, we are not going to get any output, but we certainly cleared the error. And now you can ask me then how to call it. Well, since it is also a function, it is very simple to call it. To call it again, you just get rid of the semicolon and you call it like this. You pass this parenthesis and now this function will be called only once. If I save this, now you will see the output, okay? So this is a very simple IIFE, immediately invoked function expression, and there is no way you can call this function again and again. This function will only execute once and never again. And the same would also work for an arrow function, because an arrow function is also just an expression. So I can create the structure of an arrow function. Let's go with the same console.log statement. And now you cannot do this because this is not an IIFE. So to make it an IIFE, you have to wrap this entire structure of arrow function into this larger parenthesis block, because parenthesis is a sign of a function, okay? So inside this, if you paste this, now this became an IIFE. Now if you save it, it is not going to print because we haven't called it yet. Now sometimes, okay, so you see that prettier already refactored it, so I need to exactly do this. I'm gonna cut this part, I'm gonna print it here, and then I need to call it like this. If I save this now, now this is also an IIFE. So now we are getting the same output from multiple IIFE. One is a regular function expression, so this IIFE is created using a regular function expression, and then this IIFE is created using an arrow function. Okay, now let's come back to the original question, which was why this pattern was invented. Why would we want to do something like this in our program? Okay, so we know that function creates a scope, right? And what is important here is that one scope does not have access to variables from an inner scope. For example, I can do this. If I say const is private data equals to 30, I cannot call this private data out here in the global context, global execution context. Here is private data, global scope. Okay, this will bring reference error in the console. This will print reference error. Say we get reference error, is private data is not defined, but the opposite thing can be done. If I declare a variable here, let's say const hello equals to hi, I can access this hi inside this function because scope chain works the other way. I have discussed about scope chain in the main JavaScript course. If I now save this, you will see that okay, it says hi is not defined, it is not a function. Oh, what did I just do? Okay, IIFE is creating problem. I need a semicolon, and now it should work. Okay, so now you can see that we were successfully able to call a function that was created in the global scope inside this function block, but the same was not able to possible. We were not able to call this is private data outside of the function. Okay, why? Because each block creates its own scope, which is local to their inside block. Okay, so therefore we say that data defined inside the scope here is encapsulated inside this function scope, and data encapsulation and data privacy are extremely important concept in programming. So many times we actually need to protect our variables from being accidentally overwritten by some other parts of the program, or even with external scripts or libraries. And I will talk in details about these concepts in the object-oriented programming section. But for now, keep in mind that it is very important to hide variables, and scopes are a good tool for doing this. And this is also why IIFE immediately invoked function expressions were invented. So basically this pattern here, IIFE, this isn't actually a feature of the JavaScript language. It is more of a pattern that some developers came up with, and then they started implementing it in their project, and from there it was picked by the JavaScript developers community, and they also started using this pattern. Okay, now this is one aspect of IIFE. Now I hope you remember what also creates a scope in ES6 is variables declared with let and const. So let and const also creates a scope inside a block, right? So if we do this one, a very simple block here, I can say const is private equals to 30. So this will also be accessible only inside this block. I cannot access this one outside of this block. So I cannot again say CL is private data. Let's call it data2 because I think we have already created this variable here. Okay, or let's quickly delete this one, or let's comment this one. Let's not delete it. Okay, I need to give it as a reference to you. If I again do this, we are going to run into an error, a reference error. Okay, it says hello is not defined because we commented hello and we are calling it. And now we are going to get a reference error for each private data is not defined. Now what can be defined inside this block, which is accessible outside of the block also, is a variable declared with the var keyword. So if I say not private data equals to 34, any random number, if I try to access not private data, we will certainly be able to access it. Okay, So now again I need to comment this out. So now you see that we are successfully able to print data that was actually access variable that was created using the var keyword. And this is the reason why in modern JavaScript if we are not that used anymore, because if all we want is to create a new scope for data privacy, all we need to do is to just create a block like this, right? There is no need to create a function to create a new scope, unless of course we want to use var for our variable declarations, but we already know we probably shouldn't do that. Now on the other hand, if what you already need is to execute a function just once, then the IIFE is still the way to go even now with the modern JavaScript. Next up is closures.